Welcome to the Shortway Show. Yes, it is a little early today. Usually we're at 7 p.m., but today we are at 6 p.m. on the East Coast. Thank you so much for giving me a chunk of your evening. And you're saying, Larry, why in the world would you go 6 p.m. when you usually 7 p.m.? I'm going to tell you why, because I have a great guest today. That's why. So don't complain. Instead, listen. It's going to be a great guest, or watch if you're watching. Listening is good too. Whichever one you're doing is awesome. Listening to both, because we're going to talk about the idea of UBI, MMT in America. And a lot of people I know watching are like, what? Yes, I know, but it's okay. I got the guy who literally wrote the book on this. Let There Be Money. The guy who wrote the book. He is a writer. He is a senior advisor. He is a UBI advocate. He is the man himself, Scott Santens. How are you?
Hi, Larry. I'm good, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing great. And for those of you who want to follow him, please do so. Head over to his website, scottsantens.com. And if you're listening, that is Scott, as you would think, but Santens is SANTENS.com, or follow him on Twitter at Scott Santens. So I have to ask the question, MMT. Most people know MMT as modern monetary theory. But you in your book have called it literally the magical money tree.
Yeah.
Why should we believe in a magical money tree?
Yeah, I think it's fun to lean into this magical money tree kind of understanding, just because I think it helps people understand that it's not money that is the limit to what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's what money can buy. So
Right.
we can create as much money as we want to. It's just that what matters is, what can that money buy? What are the resources required to accomplish that? What about the workers that we have, the technology, the way the global supply lines are set up, like everything together, like it's the real stuff that matters. What are the goods and services that money can actually buy that matters? And when it comes to a country like the US that has its own currency, that creates its own currency, we use a fiat money system that
Right.
it could just create the money, and it always creates the money. So every time that government spends, all of that spending is actually new money. And then taxation just pulls money out of the economy and out of existence. It's kind of
So
like,
let me touch that real fast.
Yeah.
You have said a couple things which I think are surprising to most people in your book, which is you say the positive, wonderful thing that money is not real, but people are real, right? Which sounds amazing. I love that, the way that feels. But you've also said that our government isn't run by taxes, that our government's actually run by basically debt, creating money. It's basically based upon that, but it's almost like a private debt. So it's like that. It's a whole different way of looking at government spending and taxation.
Yeah, I think that we need to just cover a bit of what we mean by debt, because I think
Okay.
that's a word that confuses people. So
And scary.
like, yeah, because at the household level, the way that we experience debt is like, say, credit cards and loans, and whatever debt we take on, we have to pay back, and we certainly can't spend outside of our means. And like, this is like this feeling of, I don't want debt. But the way that the government works is that the government creates money, and if it does not tax back as much as it spends, then it runs a deficit. And then when it runs a deficit, it then chooses to issue treasury securities. And treasury securities are this, it's kind of like a savings account for,
Okay.
it's a ultra safe way of investing and saving with a guaranteed interest rate. And we choose to do that. Now, the reason we issue treasury securities one for one with our deficit spending, the logic behind it is that it's counterinflationary. So if
Okay.
we run a deficit, then we've essentially
Okay.
increased the size of the money supply for the private sector, and so
Yep.
therefore that can mean more money chasing the same amount of stuff. So a treasury security says, all right, well, let's actually basically incentivize people to not spend the amount of that deficit. So let's like kind of freeze that money for a year, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, in order to avoid any kind of inflationary pressure. So that's the way that it's not really accurate to call that the national debt. The national debt is more like the total amount of money that we have not taxed out of existence that is available for the private sector to use, invest, and spend and save. And it's paired with these government created securities, these government assets that is just not accurate to call debt because it's an
So
asset
what you're
instead.
saying, if I get this correctly, is that, and you've said this also, you've said that whenever someone pays back a loan or whenever we pay taxes, we're actually destroying money. We're destroying the dollar. So
Right.
paying back debt and and taking taxes is destroying money. So you're saying that if we destroy more money, right, whenever we do that, then that's going to help with inflation,
Right.
assuming that we don't have less goods and services. So taxation is then a good thing. The more we tax, the more we deal with inflation.
Yeah, a taxation is a way of removing money from the economy and therefore help manage inflationary pressure. And the thing that I think is important too about understanding that it's a resource limit really and not a money limit is that we can also kind of see that there are other ways of decreasing inflationary pressures that
So yeah,
aren't
so
taxes.
let me walk down that road, right? Because I get what you're saying. I understand your logic behind this. I do. Wouldn't I rather then, I think this is maybe where you're going, wouldn't I rather not have taxes if I could, in my perfect world, no taxes if I could, and instead maybe reduce regulations, change the world to where more people can produce more goods and services, and that would also then be a buffer for inflation without the destructive nature of taxes. So I could just make it to where more people can make more stuff, can do more stuff, and then who needs taxes?
Right. Yeah. We can. This is the kind of the I would call it like the conservative argument for MMT is this ability to actually reduce the amount of taxes that we do by finding ways of reducing inflationary pressures through other means. Like as a very simple example, I think like the Jones Act is kind of a good
Mhm.
thing to look at. So like the
Yep.
Jones Act is just this weird kind of law that says that we have to only use boats that are U.S. based in order to ship it, like within the U.S. And why do we do that? Like, you know, it's a really old law and it creates this supply bottleneck. And so
Yep.
the during the pandemic, like it was really helped mess around with the supply chain to the point where it did help create price pressure upwards. And so if we just eliminate the Jones Act, then we would actually enable this we would ease the supply bottleneck, which would actually have this reduction impact on prices. And so looked at it that way, like you could actually say with a UBI, uh, you could eliminate the Jones Act and have like a higher UBI, or you could, you know, raise taxes in order to have the same counterinflationary impact. And so between those two things, I think it makes more sense to actually reduce that supply limiting regulation in order to actually help, you know, quote unquote, pay for the basic income by actually making more supply possible.
So I love the idea of, less things in the black market, right? More things in the regular everyday market to provide more above board services and goods to people who want it. And then they will find their own way of finding, supplies and labor or whatever the case may be. But you bring up a couple other things in that same realm. One thing you bring up is the idea of intellectual property and the idea that that is actually an artificial way of limiting supply, and that inflation is less about how much money we print and more about supply issues, which is almost in direct, I mean, it's like directly against what most libertarians are saying. Most libertarians are saying, it's making the money that is making the inflation, and you're saying, yeah, but just increase supply and who cares? Am I kind of reading you right?
Yeah, yeah, kind of. Although again, I'm not saying that taxes aren't important. That really the order of events. So it's that when you're looking at money, it's that money is created first and then taxed out of existence, instead of the traditional belief, which says that you have to tax first and then that allows you to spend. So like if you're looking at, say, a $3 trillion government budget, and let's say they're taxing $3 trillion. So, that's a revenue neutral, no deficit kind of situation. And so one way of looking at it is saying that it's taxing $3 trillion and then we spend $3 trillion. And the way I'm saying that we should look at it is that we are creating $3 trillion and then taxing $3 trillion out of the economy. Both of them, you can look at them as the same thing. But I think that if you look at it as money first, then it enables you to see these other things, like the fact that we can reduce inflation through these other means, and that
this
it's
is
really
what's happening with the debt ceiling, right? It's why people don't get the debt ceiling, right? The average American doesn't get the debt ceiling. But what you're saying is this is literally the debt ceiling. We make the money, and then we got to tax it back to pay, and that's the debt ceiling, basically. So
like I would say the debt ceiling is the silly thing that doesn't need to exist. I mean, we're really the only country in the world besides one other that has a debt ceiling. So obviously countries don't need it in order to function properly. And it just kind of is weaponized. I think that people are scared of it because, again, we think of it as this like national debt. It's this big scary thing. It's a big number. And it's like, oh my gosh, it keeps increasing. But
$31 trillion.
Right. But that debt, quote unquote, is actually a surplus for the private sector. So it's the money that the private sector has. That's what the money that we have to spend. It's the money that we have to invest and create things. And so if they were to, suddenly tax $10 trillion and reduce the debt by $10 trillion, we would suck $10 trillion out of the private sector, which would be just like massively impactful on all sorts of investments in our spending and the economy in whole. It would just be just absurdly impactful. So I don't think we should be scared of this. I think we just see it as these treasury securities that are very popular, and just that
you call this, right? You call this the magical bathtub, right?
Yeah,
and that we should look at it as if there's a bathtub full of basically dollars or money, right? That's the bathtub. The water is the money. And that as you drain it, that's taxes, right? Pulling the money out. And as you pour it in, that's us making more money, right? But you call it, if I remember right, a complex adaptive system. Did I get the term right?
Yeah.
Which means that magical bathtub can get bigger.
Right.
And in your world, and this is what I guess is hard for me to really grasp, you're saying that bigger is better, right? We want a big bathtub that's just not overflowing, right? But a big bathtub and a bigger bathtub. So bigger is better, right? So if our debt, which is not debt as you say, but what we are saying as debt is 60 trillion. As long as it's not overflowing, we're good. 80 trillion. As long as it's not overflowing, we're good. Am I right with that?
Yeah, where overflowing is understood as inflation. And so like it is possible to put enough water in and not drain enough water out, so the rate of net water is increasing, which helps grow the tub because there's more money for people to spend on stuff. There's more supply of things, and more supply of things needs more money, unless you're going to have a deflationary kind of impact, which I would argue against, because we don't want people like hoarding their money. We want people to actually spend it in a consumer economy, and our economy is 70% consumer driven. So like we want people spending their dollars, and so that's why I'd argue that we need a little bit of inflation. The question is like, what is the amount of inflation that is kind of optimal?
So hold on, maybe clear on this. So you're saying you want inflation because inflation makes people spend money.
Yeah, I think it's good to have a small amount of inflation. And as long as it's like a stable amount. So let's say it stays at 2%, on a year by year basis, or it stays at 3%, or it stays at 4% or year by year basis. That's fine. What you don't want is like, 5%, 10%, 20%, 50%, 100%.
I don't understand
like just ever increasing inflation.
Why? Okay. I guess two things that are getting to me here. One is if inflation goes up, my spending power goes down, right? Because inflation goes up. Unless my wages or my salary is going up with it, I'm losing money in this regard. So wouldn't I be more afraid to spend money because now I'm losing it? So now I'm afraid. Oh my God, I'm not making as much money. I don't have as much. My rent dollar is now a whole lot more valuable to me. Maybe I don't want to go buy the that cool new iPad. Maybe I don't want to do the new thing now. Doesn't the reverse work?
Well, so the reason that, say, most central banks around the world agree on this kind of like 2% inflation target as like optimal is because it's seen as being, say, just enough to actually enable employers to actually kind of do this annual wage increase. And again, if your wage increase is 2%, then people feel that they're doing better and they're happy they're getting this raise, and there is that incentive to spend instead of hold on to it because you're just not deflating. And so that's just this kind of worldwide kind of agreement that some motion is good for economic.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So if that's the case and inflation's okay, how in the world do we deal with what's been happening, which is over the course of years, all of a sudden for X number of years, massive inflation, right? It's happened here or there, right? We had a lot of it last year and year before. Obviously, the 70s, that was another time, lots of inflation. How do we? I feel like if this is the plan's not working. And I see a lot of inflation and a lot of bad things. The book even mentioned a specific year, a lot of tough things that are happening in 1973, right after Nixon made his change and kind of got us onto the fiat currency when we weren't based on anything. So it feels like either we're screwing it up or something's going wrong. Or maybe I'm missing something.
Well, the Nixon change certainly did a big change, and around that same time, productivity decoupled from wages. So we've had stagnant wages overall for decades, and so
Yep.
most of the productivity growth has gone to the top, and so that
Yes.
this decoupling of productivity is largely responsible for increasing inequality and the fact that people just aren't doing better despite all this newer technology and stuff. And so that certainly was a big thing. But like I would also say that the fiat money system, I think, is great overall because it actually decouples you from this limited resource. Like we wouldn't have had as much economic growth in general if we had continued tying ourselves to this gold standard, where all that mattered is that we had to have this amount of gold in order to spend. So in this high tech economy where greater growth is possible, like we shouldn't be restrained to this kind of arbitrary limit. What should matter is our entire total
So hold
economic
on.
capacity.
You're saying having gold is an arbitrary limit, but a fiat currency is an arbitrary limit?
No, because we can create as much money as we want to. The
By default being
challenge is
arbitrary?
determining the it's the gold is this arbitrary static limit.
Oh,
And the fiat money system allows this complex adaptive system where you have growth and prices adjust, that you can have balances, that things can change, that you can have, you know, that something within the economy can grow that isn't limited to the money. And so, like, you don't want to create this system where, let's say, a company could create stuff and sell stuff, but
right.
there isn't enough money to buy it because there's a certain limit of gold, and you're then tying yourself to that. What I'm saying is we should think of this as in what is our actually economic capacity, what is our ability to actually create goods and services, and we should try to match what we have available for goods and services with the money. Like those things should try to balance out instead of locking ourselves
I
into
feel
something.
like what you're telling me, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, is that central planning is going to be a key part of this, right? To plan for the resources or to plan for the building, that kind of, is that what you mean?
Well, no, I wouldn't say central planning. It's really kind of more like a feedback system where,
Okay.
so you have like this like I believe that we should have a UBI as part of this, as this floor, in order for
Right.
everything to work optimally. And
No, I get it. If you're following the MMT model, then I think UBI makes sense. I'm with you, right? My worry is handling the MMT model, but I agree
right.
with you. If you follow the MMT model, UBI makes sense. Absolutely, yes.
So yeah. So I'm just what I'm trying to say is that whatever your spending is and whatever you're spending on, um, and you see this inflation as a result, and you should tweak things based on what that is.
Right.
And a lot of that, of course, is also, completely decentralized as far as the people
Mhm.
go. People are starting up their own businesses. People are choosing to spend how they want to spend. There's a lot of freedom in that at the personal level to decide what it is you want to buy,
Okay.
what services should be provided. And those signals are being sent within a free market system. Um, so I'm not saying that there should be some like central decision making authority on this.
Okay. You're not saying that.
It's
Okay.
just that, we should reflect on the impacts of these things and then adjust accordingly.
Well, I like this certain thing, and I may get it wrong, but I think you called it automatic stabilizers. That idea that when a certain number hits a certain thing, almost like how they do it in the stock market, right? If it goes too far, too fast, trading stops for a certain period of time. If it goes too far, too fast, a trade gets done or a trade gets stopped, right? And then when it gets back, things change. I like that concept because things actually end with your system. So like once the crisis is over, the rules end. The way we do it now, the rules never end, whether the crisis ever ends or not. So I like that concept. Are you talking something like that, that the government would know that, okay, now inflation's gone too far, so we'll change interest rates, or now the economy's better, so we'll shift or adjust this? Is that what you mean by uh, this idea of automatic stabilizers?
Yeah, so as an example of a automatic stabilizer, I think it would have been great if we already had, a UBI in place prior to the pandemic hitting. And so
Hmm.
then the pandemic hits, and then we do the shutdown. And so then we have to figure out, how do we get money to people? And so the way that we did do it is we said, all right, let's do boosted unemployment. And because people are losing income who are still employed, let's also do stimulus payments. And like those two responses were different, and the unemployment boost required a difference in every single state. So this was like very complicated. There were people on the phone for like
Yes.
weeks at a time. There were people who waited months for their first payment. Like it's a real mess when it comes to the unemployment system. And so they just tried to basically boost that in hopes of that solving the issue of like the sudden increase in mass unemployment. So if we had already had a basic income in place, we could have just have temporarily boosted that. We could have said, well, okay, suddenly people are losing their incomes, so we have to somehow replace that more, and so let's boost it up. Let's say it was $1,000 per month before the pandemic hit, and they said, well, let's boost it up to like 1,500 or
But hold
2,000
on
or
now. If
whatever.
if I do that, right, and I boost everything up, and people are getting whatever, $2,000 a month, now they get 3,000 or whatever's the number. But to your supply point, there's no supply, right? I mean, people aren't working, right? They're not making the things that people want. Aren't I literally firing up inflation by doing that? Because I'm, to your point, not letting people work because they're locked in their homes. So I'm not
Right.
creating goods and services, but then here's a whole bunch of money. Aren't I literally making things worse?
We purposely wanted to create inflationary pressure during the pandemic because the danger was actually deflation. Like deflation is what leads to the Great Depression. Like we didn't want massive deflation to happen, because then that's like hugely difficult to restart the economy, to build up. That's what we really wanted to avoid. And so that should be seen as really expensive too. And so that's even, the estimates were that if we didn't respond to the pandemic with actually boosted unemployment and stimulus checks, then we could have seen, I think it was like a $6 to $8 trillion loss in the economy. So then and this was like a measurement by the Fed, and so the thinking was, well, anything below that amount is actually preventing that much bigger loss. So yeah, like this was an example where we wanted to actually create some inflationary pressure,
Wow.
and then
Okay.
part of the issue too is that, we had plenty of, let's say, food. It wasn't like during the pandemic that suddenly we ran out of food. It was, we had full grocery stores. except for maybe like toilet paper and stuff.
Toilet paper, yes,
that
I
was due
remember
to
that.
that was due
Yes,
to hoarding behavior. It
absolutely.
wasn't that we didn't have enough toilet paper. It was that people like, oh crap, like I'm gonna buy 10 packages of toilet paper, and so there
Yes.
was like shock there. But we had like these giant lines for food banks, and like
Yep.
people were in their cars
I
because
remember.
they didn't want to be in person, and like we had full stores. So what we needed is people needed money in order to go to the store to buy food, but they didn't have money, so they had to go to the food banks, and then we had to like mess around with the whole food supply system to get food to the food banks instead of the stores. Like it was a mess.
The other issue that we have is, and Joe super chats this, so I want to pick it up. Joe, thank you for the $5 super chat. I appreciate it. Every time the topic of universal basic income is brought up, I always think of it as being a bad idea because people won't work. It's dumb. You've got to hear that, right? And I think we did hear some of that during the pandemic. That literally said, look, I don't want to go to work anymore, right? I'm getting my unemployment check. I'm getting my money from the government. I'm getting my Biden bucks or Trump bucks when Trump was president, Trump bucks when Biden was president, Biden bucks. I'm getting my president bucks and I'm getting my unemployment. You know what? Maybe I don't want to work. Does Joe have a point here?
Yeah, so this is actually a great opportunity to even explain the difference between something like the unemployment system and basic income. And so I was even talking about this a lot when we boosted unemployment, because what we were doing is creating a greater disincentive to work. Let's say before the boost unemployment, someone could have been getting, say, like $500 worth of unemployment per month. That was like kind of the existing system. And again, it varies per state. So let's just say that's what it was for someone. And then it was boosted. So then someone could be getting, say, $1,500 per month or $2,000 per month or something of unemployment. And the condition to receive that income is to remain unemployed. So when you do that, then you are creating a work disincentive. But if we had had a basic income, and so if we'd actually even increased it, then someone would have been getting, say, $1,500 per month in basic income during the pandemic. And then if they get a job, they keep it. So you could get a job if it offered $2,000 per month, and that would have been $3,500 total. So you don't have that disincentive. With the pandemic, people were choosing, let's say, $2,000 per month of unemployment versus a $2,000 per month job, or even less than that in a job. And so there's no incentive to accept a job when you're actually worse off by accepting it. So that's a big difference between those things. And that's true for welfare in general as well. Like you always have to keep your income below a certain level in order to keep getting that. And when it comes to something like housing assistance that, can really take years and years and years to get, and you don't want to lose your house, then that just says, I have to keep my income below this.
Right.
Like, it makes no sense to accept a job. But basic income doesn't have that. You're always better off. And that's what the evidence shows. Like study after study shows that people do not start working less. The only real demographic to start working less are like new moms and students. And I wouldn't say that's working less. It's just changing the work from employment to a form of unpaid work. And students is like investing in their future with work that'll actually mean better, higher paying work, more skilled work later on.
Well, not with our current college system, but in theory.
In theory.
Yes, I'm teasing. But let me grab a couple, let me do a little bit of work if I could here. Guys, if you like what you're hearing and you like this kind of conversation, do me a favor, click that like button now, right? If you like it, click the like button. It does matter. If you want to support the show, you can either super chat if you want to, if you're on Larry Shop YouTube, or you can support my sponsors. You can head over to theadvocates.org and take the world's smallest political quiz. You can do that. In fact, if you want to, you could, instead of taking the world's smallest political quiz, go over there. Now you've heard what Scott has to say. You can go there and take the survey on monetary policy and think what you think about money. It's one that takes about 6 minutes. Take it. It's all free, costs you nothing, makes my sponsors happy. It's free, 6 minutes. Take it and then share your results. Share your results online so people can see it. Makes my sponsors happy. Theadvocates.org. Please do that. And lastly, Scott's being so good to us, giving us these conversations. Follow him. Head over to his website, scottsantens.com, or follow him on Twitter at Scott Santens. So let me go to the next question I guess I have here is,
okay,
if we're going to be doing this with a UBI, right? And we're going to be using modern monetary theory or the magical money tree. I love that one. Either one, whatever it is, right? aren't we incentivizing companies, not just people in the case of Joe's question, but companies to just spend, right? I remember when I was in the Marine Corps, and in the Marines, and you probably know this in many government agencies, I shouldn't say most, I know many, if you don't spend your budget, you lose it. So you need to spend it. And the federal, if I think it's still true, the federal fiscal year ends in October. So September, October, Marines are out there at the firing range, firing every weapon, getting rid of all the ammunition. We're breaking stuff because we got to make sure we have enough money for our next year. School systems, I know New York State's notorious for this, just spending money on stuff at the end of the year to make sure they can get all their dollars back. Am I not creating that same incentive that, look, it's the magical money tree. If I don't spend it, someone else is going to get it. I just got to spend. Do I risk that?
Yeah, so this is actually another reason why I think UBI is important, as long as we're thinking of things from like an MMT perspective, because you really want to maximize efficiency and you want to make sure that you avoid unnecessary spending. And so what we're doing right now with, even let's say the military, to the large degree, the military is a jobs program. Like we're actually like when we expand the budget like year after year after year for the military, a lot of this is because the members of Congress in these states have all these jobs that get part of that budget.
That's
and so they
exactly
want to
my
keep
worry.
that going. And so like you even have like Department of Defense saying like, we don't need this much money. Stop giving it to us.
We don't want these tanks. Don't build more tanks, please.
But we do it anyways because it's this jobs program. So if we decouple income from jobs, then we actually avoid that kind of incentive structure because people are already getting the income. And so like when it comes to health insurance too, I think is a good example. When we have our Medicare and Medicaid systems, we're actually treating the lack of basic income to a large degree. So people who are in poverty, people who are chronically stressed, people who are insecure, these actually create these conditions like diabetes, heart disease, they lead to cancer. All these things are related to the fact that people don't have enough stable money on a monthly basis to both afford stuff that they need and also live with enough security to not be completely stressed out that leads to these conditions. So what we do is like, let's say we're fine with spending, $150,000, $1 million, whatever, to like treat someone, let's say with like heart surgery or something. But we could have avoided that if that person had just had a basic income. It's not going to do it for everybody, but it's interesting to a large degree. That's what it is.
But if we have a UBI, right, whatever, sake of argument, $1,500, right, sake of argument, whatever that number is per month. Am I now incentivizing my Congress people, my senators, my governors, my president into buying votes, right? Aren't I going to say, hey, you know what? Vote for me and I'm going to vote for it to go from 15 to 1600, or no, vote for me and I'll go to 1700, right? If the magical tub is a magical tub, aren't I going to say, well, let's just go further, right? Aren't I incentivizing us to go to overflow, I guess? Or aren't I incentivizing my leadership to make sure it overflows?
Yeah, so I would say on the one hand, I would say tax cuts are the same thing. That we've seen for decades that politicians say, vote for me and I'll cut your taxes. So what that means is you get to have a disposable income increase. And so that's what basic income is saying too. You get a disposable income increase. So if basic income is buying votes, then so is cutting taxes is buying votes.
But people push back against cutting taxes, right? They do.
Right.
People do go, don't do that. Maybe we shouldn't. They fight back. Why would people fight back against the more UBI when literally everybody gets it? Tax cuts will go to certain people depending on what you do. But an increase in UBI, everybody's getting more cash, and it's the magical money tree. So where's the pushback? I guess I don't see the pushback.
Well, so the pushback is even just people feel that, too much money is too much money. They don't want those people to have too much money. There is certainly this stigma against it. That's why it's so difficult. And then if we have a basic income, then you're dealing with taxes too, because again, even though it's a quote unquote magical money tree, that you do actually want to manage inflation. And so you would be raising taxes if you raise the basic income. And then the question is how we're raising the taxes, who are paying those taxes, what do those tax increases look like,
Oh, so
instead
UBI
of
is
just doing
also
this.
taxed.
The UBI isn't taxed, but everything else is taxed. So
Everything else is taxed.
right. There's
Okay.
always net recipients and net payers based on the amount of UBI and the kind of tax that it is. So
you're actually in favor of eliminating all income tax.
I would prefer that we tax other things than income. I think that it makes more sense to have. I would prefer like things like carbon taxes, land value taxation, and very like a small transaction tax on like every transaction. I think is an effective consumption tax. So instead of this being like a big thing or even a value added tax that I think is kind of second best, but a small transaction tax on everything automatically, I think would be a great way of pulling money out of the economy in order to manage inflationary pressures.
All right. That's not so bad. Stephen also super chat. Thank you for the $2. I appreciate it. He says, Scott's thoughts on negative income tax versus UBI. And this is an important piece, Scott. I don't know if you're aware, but most libertarians hate UBI. I don't know if you're aware of that. However, there's a chunk of libertarians, me being one of them, who's not against negative income tax. In fact, when I ran for governor, I had a negative income tax plan for New York State.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference from people who may not know this, the difference in general, I'm going to be very generic on this difference so that people can just get it in general. A UBI is everybody gets a flat fee every month. That's it, done. A negative income tax is there's a number, whatever that number is. In my case, it was $18,000. And as you make more or less, you get enough money to kind of work your way up until at 36,000, you get nothing. So you're able to work your way up to getting nothing, or you stay at the lowest you will make is $18,000. That's your base income is that number. But wealthy people don't get it. Upper middle class people don't get it. And it's a negative income tax. So it's stepped up. What is your feeling between those two?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that a lot of people don't know that Milton Friedman himself was asked about negative income tax versus UBI. Yep. And he said they were two different ways of doing the same thing. So he approved of both. He just talked about a negative income tax, I think, for political reasons, as being something that, again, it feels like it's cheaper because you're spending less money directly to people and you're varying the amount so that fewer amount of people get it. But again, when you look at a negative income tax, let's say you're comparing this amount with a 50% clawback rate, you could duplicate that with a UBI and a 50% flat income tax. So you'd be effectively clawing it back at the top, the flat income tax. The net distribution would be exactly the same as the outcome. So let's say a negative income tax, you phase it out, and then someone at, let's say, $100,000, they're getting $0. And at that exact same point with an identical designed UBI, at that same point, someone would be getting, say, $12,000 of basic income, but their increase in taxes would be $12,000, which would be a net zero. So that's how it's two ways of doing the same thing. However, I would say, too, that you can actually achieve lower marginal tax rates for the UBI. And so
lower marginal.
Right. So with a negative income tax, usually it's often spoken about with like a 50% phase out rate. And you should see that as a 50% phase out tax. So that's a 50% tax on income in the phase out range.
I think that's true. Yep, that's accurate.
I think it's better to lower that phase out rate in across the population. And I would also prefer, like, again, with a consumption tax, if you do this, if you do the phase out via consumption tax, then you're not applying a 50% marginal income tax. And instead,
okay, so let me see if I get this. What you're saying is
tax. If
everybody gets the money, but you do a flat rate, maybe even over a certain amount, like say, for example, I'm making this up. You do a flat, whatever, 15% tax, whatever the number is, right? And you do that only, say, for every dollar you earn over 36,000. I'm making that number up, right? So if your UBI was $3,000 a month, you'd actually wind up paying no taxes on your UBI, right? If you made a cap, right, of a minimum cap. But then everyone else who's making more is paying so much, they're paying more than UBI. So you're basically saying pay everybody and let taxes fix it. That's kind of what you're saying.
Right. That's why in my book I say pay them all and let taxes sort them out. Like use taxes as the actual phase out. Again, that's also bureaucratic and administratively efficient. So with a negative income tax, what you're going to do is say, all right, let's do a test for every single person and let's ask them what their income was, probably using last year's taxes as a way of determining that, and then allow them to say, no, my income has changed. And so you have to actually create this process where there's this bureaucratic burden for every single person throughout, and then you still have the tax burden. So then still everyone does their taxes and then you do the calculation anyways. So why not just not do a calculation on the front end and only do it on the back end? That way you're actually saving money on administration costs because you're not having the overhead of the negative income tax bureaucracy.
So is this idea of UBI in this case, does this replace all other public assistance? Is this in addition to? Like, I know when Andrew Yang spoke about it, this was in addition to. Is this a world where
things.
Well, is this a world where, you know what, we're gonna scratch, no more welfare, no more food stamps, no more rent, no more Section 8 housing, none of that. It's just, here's your money, good luck. Is it that?
So I think there's this happy medium between those two extremes of like, don't touch anything and get rid of everything. I think that, and also depends on the amount of money. So whatever, if the UBI is sufficiently high, then I think that it makes sense to get rid of things like SNAP and especially TANF. And I think that there are things in the tax code like the EITC, these kinds of things that no longer need to exist with this equal income floor that people receive. There's certainly stuff that we can axe entirely, but then there's also stuff that I think that we should keep entirely. I think that, say, healthcare is a good example of like, we don't want to eliminate Medicare as a result of basic income. I just think that we would be
that's
spending...
not a cash handout, though. I'm talking cash handouts.
Okay, so
I'm not talking about systems, right? Like, so if you still have VA, still have Medicare, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about cash handouts is what I'm talking about.
So if we're only talking about cash, then there's also things that I would suggest that we don't need as much of. So let's say disability income is a good example. So right now, someone gets $0 if they are not able to qualify for disability, even if they have a disability. And then if they qualify for it, then let's say SSI, I think peaks at around $800 per month right now. And so with basic income, you could actually have that a smaller amount of disability income operate on top of the UBI. And that way we'd be spending less money on disability, but at the same time, they would be better off. And same thing with Social Security. Like Social Security is designed to bring people from zero to whatever the maximum Social Security amount is that they're receiving.
Right.
And so you wouldn't need as much Social Security too. So we could actually reduce payroll taxes. We could reduce Social Security as a whole, but they would still be better off as well because it's adding to the basic income. It's just you don't need as much because you're lifting from whatever the UBI is to the point you want to reach versus from zero to the point that you want to reach.
See, the point that there's a part that's very attractive to me, and that part is ending all the bureaucracy. Right? Joe says abolish the IRS, right? So that concept to me, I love that concept that we could just basically you've heard this before, right? You put your taxes on a postage stamp, a postcard, send it in, right? That concept I adore, right? Getting rid of all of the bureaucracy, all of the government workers, right? And just here's your money, move on. If it's that, I'm more attracted to it. But my worry is, okay, we create a UBI, and nothing else changes, right? That to me is probably my biggest fear of UBI. I have many fears, but my biggest one is we write everybody to check and nothing else changes. They just get more money with the same incentive that you mentioned earlier to not work, right? The not work incentives which are there now, but the current system is broken. That's why we've been talking about UBI and negative income tax, because I think we're in agreement. The current system is completely broken. My worry is we just put this Band-Aid on top of a broken system and never fix the broken system. If we could abolish it, I'm more open to the concept. Am I making sense at least?
Oh yeah, no, I get it, and I agree that there should be a change in the way that we do things as a result of this. I think that maybe the easiest kind of change that we could do is actually just make sure that, for one, right now people have to qualify for um, welfare by having, this certain amount of um, money in order to
Right.
qualify for, and if they exceed it, then they lose it.
So all they
With
do
a
is
basic
lie.
income,
They
well,
just lie. You're you're right.
that's part of it, I guess. But what I'm saying is that that we could count the basic income as income. And so if people only qualify for, TANF or something, if they earn under $500 per month, and then now they're receiving $1,000 per month, then we could just say, well, they're getting over $500 per month, so they no longer qualify for that. So we can just say that basic income is the income that helps you qualify for certain programs. And so therefore we could phase out
Oh,
a
I
lot
see
of
what you're saying.
programs already. So we wouldn't even be
Right.
axing them. It would be a way of saying, look, TANF is still there because maybe for some people in certain situations, they do meet that qualifying line still for need. But for a lot of people, they wouldn't. And so therefore you could cut a lot of spending that way, and no one would be worse off because you're not axing the program. You're just saying, look, if you're above this line, then you are. And if you're below it, you're not. And
Got it. Okay.
that would be, I think, a kind of a something that people could agree on, that they wouldn't otherwise do. And one other thing too, I think that people who have a basic income are less likely to even apply for these other programs because the programs are
Mm,
meant to be very bureaucratically difficult
yes.
and a hassle and punitive and very conditional. So if you already have basic income, why do that? And if you have fewer people even applying for those things, then again, you're spending less on those things too, and there's just not as much use of them.
So let me talk to my audience real fast. If you are listening to this or watching this on Twitter, do me a favor, retweet this. Retweet it right now. Let people know that we're talking. Retweet it right now so that people can see what we're doing and we can grow and get past all those algorithms that I always bring up all the time. And if you haven't liked the show already, what's wrong with you? Like the show. What do you hate me? Like the show. Do it now. It does matter. Please do that. And as you hear me say all the time, please follow Scott if you could. Go visit his website, scottsantens.com, or follow him on Twitter at Scott Santens. And if you're listening to this, Scott Santens, Scott is as Scott, and Santens is Santens. So I guess the other piece that I want to bring up is someone asked me to ask this question, which is you also bring up the idea of electoral change in your book, which I didn't get. Like, why would that be in the book, right? The book is about making money, right? But you
Mhm.
talk about that. Josh says, can you ask Scott why and or how electoral forms like open primaries combined with ranked choice voting are pathways to help get popular policies like UBI passed? Why
Yeah,
does that? Don't get me wrong. I am 100% for this. Like, that's part of my plan. I'm on board with this. I just don't see how it matches with what you're talking about. If you could help me with that piece.
Yeah, so a couple different reasons for both UBI and MMT reasons. I'll do UBI first. So UBI is a very bipartisan policy. It's something that people on the left and right have agreed to over the years. It's not socialism. This is money. It's capitalism that doesn't start at zero. Like there are reasons for people to come together and agree that this is a good idea. It's just under the existing system, we actually incentivize hyperpartisanship. And so hyperpartisanship says that if someone likes an idea, then I don't. And we'll never agree.
Got it.
So it's
Okay.
that
I
much more
get you.
difficult to pass a bipartisan policy. Which
Got
is
it.
why I think that we need a reform like like nonpartisan primaries and ranked choice voting that really
Makes sense.
incentivize more collaboration. The other part of it is on the MMT kind of thinking, which is that I think that if we're going to create a government that I would say wisely uses the knowledge that it's not money that's the limit, but actually resources and everything else, that people and everything that matters, then you have to kind of go about things in a more evidence-backed way. You want to actually care about reality. You don't want to just appeal to the extremes. And so I think that you would create a Congress that's more functional and more able to actually
I got it.
make the right decisions if you use these, democracy reforms that create a better Congress.
I like it. All right. So let me go to one more piece then, if I could. Two parts, one local, one global. If the bathtub is a big bathtub and bigger is better, you've used ideas in your book like there should be a $6 trillion deficit. Those are big numbers. If we're going down that road, should we literally give everybody a mulligan, right? Should we bail out all the American people and say, hey, you know what? The government will absorb all consumer debt. If you absorbed all consumer debt, I mean, there'd be a spending spree like there's no tomorrow, wouldn't there? Wouldn't that? I mean, if all of a sudden everyone's credit card debt is paid off, everyone's mortgage is paid off, everyone's car note is paid off. Maybe I'm going too far, but I'm saying, isn't that the next level, right? Where people are already saying you should pay off my student debt loan,
right?
You should have tax relief. So if we have this MMT model, why shouldn't we give all Americans, whatever, every 10 years or whatever is the number, a full mulligan, pay off all their debt, put it into the bathtub. And man, if you paid off all my credit card debt, all my debt, I would spend a whole lot more. I think most Americans would.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is actually why, I would prefer UBI to, say, forgiving student debt as well, because when you forgive student debt, like, it is going to have this inflationary impact. You're enabling people to spend that much more money per month that they were going to spend on student loans. This is money that would have been, pulled out of the economy, but currently isn't. And with the basic income instead, I think that's more fair too, because it's saying, look, we don't want to only reward the people who took on debt, to go to college, and that was their choice. And they also happen to be the ones who were earning higher incomes, so they're probably most likely doing better than the people who didn't. And why would we eliminate their debt and not everybody else's? Whereas a basic income is fully universal and says, look, if you took on debt, then you can use this to pay down your debt. And if you didn't take on debt, then you get this, and this is, now helping you too. And so then we don't have to go down this other road of creating these inflationary pressures in ways that I don't think makes much sense. They're not as fair. They're helping some people and not others. They're rewarding certain decisions and not others.
So let me go to the next level then. America does this. Should all countries do this? Is this a thing that every country should do, or the reverse? Since America has the cool dollar, should America support everybody? Should America just make a massive bathtub and write a check to the world and get the whole world spending? I mean, is either one of those the right answer? Should each country do it themselves? Should that not happen? Should America support all the countries, or is there some combination?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't suggest that America start spending American dollars everywhere, because again, these other countries have their own currencies too. They're not going to use them. They're going to use their own currencies. It makes sense for us to do it here, and we can certainly help to some degree in other places, but I don't think it's our job and to actually do that. And when it comes to other countries, like, if a country has its own currency and is its own currency issuer, I think they're far more able to go about a basic income, because they're not, again, prevented by this potentially false limitation by using some other currency. When it comes to like the euro in Europe, certain countries in Europe that use that, it's going to be more difficult for them unless it's done completely EU wide through the ECB. But it's still possible. And I think that when it comes to like a developing country versus a developed country, there's a lot of development potential with the basic income that doesn't exist in the already developed countries. So I think you could actually see higher GDP growth rates when it comes to basic income in someplace else. But it could be more challenging if they don't have their own currency, because they have to somehow acquire the currency in order to actually pay that. But I think if they manage to do that, that they're actually going to see a much bigger impact than it would in a
So you
developed
think
economy.
UBI would actually give America almost like an advantage
Yeah.
in the world market.
Yeah, I do. I think that we would see higher productivity. I think we would see more entrepreneurship. I think we'd be, seeing a more dynamic economy. I think we'd see a better, higher functioning labor market where people are better matched to their jobs. They're more productive because they're in the job that they want, and people are even choosing to do unpaid work that's productive. That they're able to start up businesses that wouldn't otherwise be able to start up. I think it would make a huge difference, and I think that the first country to do this is actually going to see this kind of jump on other countries. And in a global economy, I think that's going to spark other countries to be like, well, I want to see that kind of economic growth too. That works great. It saves so much on healthcare and crime. It increases productivity. Why aren't we doing this? We should do this too.
Well, what I see now, right, is a massive amount, particularly American men, but many Americans, kind of opting out of working, accepting some form of government subsidy, whether that's disability or unemployment or something, and simply changing their lifestyle, actually not being more productive and just accepting less of their life, living more time online, living more time virtually, which is a lot cheaper, right? So spending their money and time not going out and being productive or going out and gaining something or gaining an experience, but accepting their experience kind of online in front of a screen, right? My worry is if we do this, aren't I going to encourage more people to step out, right? And just so you know what, no, I'm going to take the money that I get, my $2,000 or whatever I get per month, and I'm going to focus it on having really good internet connection, right? That's what I'm going to focus it on. And I'm just going to spend my time in front of a screen. And I think we kind of see that now.
Well, so again, I want to really stress the difference between the existing system and a UBI system, because the people who are opting out now, it makes more sense to do that. Like if you actually have some kind of assistance that's conditional on you maintaining a low income or unemployment, you are far more likely to do that. Whereas if you have this floor, then it's much more easier and more attractive to accept any kind of work, even part-time work. Whereas right now, it just doesn't make sense. And when it comes to like the data reflects that. So there's actually a great systematic review, meta-analysis of like dozens of studies of basic income pilots and programs of unconditional cash, and it shows that overall you can actually see an increase in employment, in total employment. So what happens is that you do see some reductions as far as like children, seniors, new mothers, students, like these kinds of things. But then what happens is, let's say when a high school student decides to go back to school instead of work, that job opens up. And then someone else who wants a job is actually able to find that job who was previously prevented because they were taking up that job. So you actually see a better functioning labor market that way.
Okay. I like it. Guys, if you're watching this and you like it, then do me a favor, click that like button. I know I tell you all the time, please do that. And also support my sponsors, theadvocates.org. Go over there and take one of those quizzes, one of those tests. It does make a lot of sense. It does help us tremendously. I'm going to stay on and chat with some of my people afterwards, but I know, Scott, you've got a hard stop.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you so much for coming on. And guys, please follow what Scott's doing. Head over to Twitter at Scott Santens. That's SANTENS if you were just listening, or check his website, scottsantens.com. Scott, anything you want to say before you take off?
Yeah, so if you go to my Twitter, I have got my pinned thread there. That's actually a very long, like so far 80-part tweet thread where each tweet is actually linking to a paper or some example of evidence. So it's a great place to find, what does the data have to say for those who are interested in the data and the evidence, who want to learn more about this. And then I've also on my blog, I've got a UBI FAQ where I answer just a lot of frequently asked questions about basic income. And so if you want to read more about this through specific questions, then that's a good place to go. And yeah, thank you so much, Larry, for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you very soon.
Thanks. See you later.
Right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So guys, I appreciate all you guys listening so far. And look, some of you might think, Larry, why the hell did you have some UBI guy on? You're a libertarian. Yeah, because it's popular. People are talking about it. We have to start talking about this. And if you don't like the answer, I'm not sure I do, to be forward with you. Doesn't matter. Then we have to have a better one, right? We can't just go UBI bad. That is not going to work. So either we've got to talk to people and accept this as some way, or find a negative income tax answer, or find a better answer, or this is going to wind up becoming more and more popular. So we have to deal with this in some way. But it's something else. I hope you saw that whether you agree with what Scott said or not, he wasn't trying to hurt. He is trying to do the right thing. His heart is in the right place, and he is trying to do the right thing. So he does care. That part matters. And you should see him as someone who actually cares and wants to make things better. And I hope you did see that. For those super chats, thank you so much. I'm glad. I'm going to start taking comments now. By the way, he had a hard stop. I wanted to make sure I took care of that. And again, if you are watching on Twitter, please retweet this. It does matter. As I keep saying, please do it if you can. So let me grab a couple of comments if I could. Many of them are out there. Wow, so many of these. All right. No soundbites allowed. By the way, it's Michael Voss. I disagree, but glad to hear Scott present his, I think he meant view. So yes, you're not typing very well, Mike. But yeah, that's my point. Yes, please. That is a good idea. It's very important for us to be doing that. Yes, 100%. So Joe says more spending means more need for jobs. I think that's true, right? I think that is true. And Joe says hookers and blow for me. Well, that's jobs, Joe. You are correct. You are absolutely correct. Yes, absolutely. Lisa says government and the current economic system kills the soul and doesn't motivate the way UBI would. Lisa, I feel like, right, that you might be correct on this. I'm not sure, right? To be forward with you and everyone listening, I have an innate worry about UBI. I just do. And maybe it's wrong, but I'm open to hearing, which is why I had him on, which is why I've been open to negative income tax, right? It's why I've been open to it. But I am, concerned about this. I am worried that maybe it's the wrong thing and that it won't incentivize people. But he brings up a valid point, right? The current system, the way it is, to your point, has a benefit cliff. Once you do a certain amount, it's gone, right? Once you get a certain amount, it's gone. You lose everything versus UBI where you get it always. And if you get a job, you're punished, right? In the current system, you're correct. UBI, you wouldn't be punished for getting a job. The same thing though with the negative income tax. I think everyone listening probably would agree with this. The current system doesn't work. It's broken like there's no tomorrow. So yeah, I'm open to having this conversation. So Chris says, need the government out of healthcare. 80% of all costs is administrative costs imposed by overregulation. Well, in his book, he talks about the idea, which is kind of interesting. There are certain parts of Scott's book that are actually libertarian. There are certain parts that are, certain parts that aren't, but there's chunks, which is why I believe he's not a partisan. He's trying to fix a problem. I think that's where Scott's head is, at least. Again, whether you agree or not, I understand. He talks about the idea that Medicare for all doesn't work without a UBI. He's like, it's going to fail without a UBI. He believes you have to make a system to where people can afford to pay for care. That's his logic. And I get that concept, right? If we just do Medicare for all, but government's still involved and it's still bureaucracy, he believes that you can do a single payer system. Now, my issue would be if you want to do single payer system, you can see how that taste already is not good in my mouth. But the idea is most people who are on the farther left will tell you single payer, that's it. No insurance companies, outlaw insurance companies. I can't get behind that, right? Can I get behind a single payer public option? I'm trying to be realistic here, Chris. I just am. I'm trying to realize where my state is, where the country is, all those things, right? It is difficult. So if I've got to make a push, where do I make the push? I think Medicare for all will become VA for all, and the VA is a disaster, except for very basic things. The VA is a disaster. I don't want that to happen. I want to make sure people are able to have good health care, not just health care, but good health care. So I don't know. Yeah. Joe says, I'll be putting my UBI in gold and silver. Well, this is the part that I think turned me a bit. If you read his book, and I did, he talks about how things changed in 1973. And then he brings up the idea of well, that's when things become uncoupled from labor and all types of things. But also, we went off the gold standard in 72. So, and then calling basing your money on gold arbitrary, but fiat currency not arbitrary. I have trouble. You probably saw when we brought it up. I had trouble hearing that one. Again, I'm open to hearing it, but wow, that is exactly the opposite of what I feel, right? I felt like gold is not arbitrary. Literally, it's a physical thing, but fiat is by default arbitrary because it's worth stuff that we say it's worth, because do it or that's the end. So, yes. Patricia says the Bible calls the year of Jubilee, Deuteronomy 15:1, presents an alternative to the debt cycle, calling for a regular remission or forgiveness every 7 years. One of the reasons why you can go bankrupt every 10 years. Same concept, right? Same idea. And I got to tell you, if you're going to go down this route, if you're going to say, you know what, let's go down this route, we're going to go magical money tree, and the money's the money. I don't know if I'm against the cancellation of debt. Give everybody a mulligan, right? Basically, let everyone default. Let me go buy a couple houses first, and then just default, and all the debt goes away. I mean, if you're going to go down this route, if it really is that big, right? If the bathtub really is that big, I guess I have to look into that, how that feels. That doesn't feel, now, I'm not saying data, to be clear. I am an ideologue. It's true. I'm a libertarian. I'm an ideologue. And I'm open to saying that I am. It doesn't feel right at all. It doesn't feel right. But again, I'm trying to be open-minded, right? I'm trying to be. Michael says, modern monetary theory leads to 1980s banana republics and Weimar Republic inflation. Please explain how it won't be. Yeah, right? That's, I'm worried too, Michael. I'm with you. I am with you. I am with you on that. Yes. So we lost Nate. Nate's out. He's like, I'm done. We lost Nate. Sorry, Nate. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to be good though. It's important that we see this, right? It's important that we talk about this. This is a big deal, right? Lisa says data should determine the amount of UBI, not bureaucrats. Oh, interesting. Okay. We are all inheritors of technology. We all inheritors of the land and its resources. We all suffer from pollution. Those should be the first things taxed and pre-distributed to everyone. Yeah, the thing I was worried about with this one, Lisa, is that bureaucrats will decide, right? That's the issue. If we were to do something like, I don't know, I'm making this have like a national referendum or something, then at least it'd be democratic. I mean, it still might be wrong, but at least it'd be democratic. But if we have bureaucrats decide, they're going to use this. He mentioned carbon tax, right? Boy, that did not sit well with me either. Because if we start doing that, we're going to start incentivizing people and controlling people via taxation. So now I'm going to say, well, whatever, the tobacco lobby gave me money, so we're going to tax vaping, at 45 times the percentage or whatever, right? That part bothers me, Lisa. I am concerned that it will be bureaucrats or it will be politicians who are bought and paid by somebody else, and that they'll just use the taxation as a weapon system against their financial enemies. So I get the idea of pay everybody and fix it via taxation. But the problem is I don't trust the system that is going to be doing the repairing fixing via taxation. If I trusted that system, I would probably be more open to this idea. I don't trust it. I just don't. Yes, and that's my worry, I think, more than anything. Yeah. And that I think is a big issue. So Nate said before he left, MMT is a Ponzi scheme. We'll rearrange wealth from the bottom to the top, just like all fiat currency does. MMT just faster. Yeah, I'm gonna do. Yes. What are you gonna do? Yes, that might be true. I can't say you're wrong, Nate. I can't say you're wrong. Sam says, Dad had a 5K life insurance policy back in the 60s. That would have been enough to buy a new car. He died 2 months ago. Today, that policy didn't even cover his casket or one single cancer treatment. Sam, thank you. That is my worry. Now, let's say that this MMT is correct. For sake of argument, he's right. It's how it works. We got this big bathtub, water coming in, coming out. If that's true, man, we're doing something wrong, right? We should be able to just turn the faucet on, turn the tax faucet on, keep the bathtub good, and we should be able to cruise to 2%. I guess that's a good number. He's decided that people decide 2% inflation, whatever. We should be good, right? That should work, and prices should go up, and insurance should go up, and everything should go up. That'd be amazing. It's not working. So if he's right, my point, as I meant earlier during the interview, it's not working. So that is my concern. It's not working right now. In fact, like you said, inflation is terrible. Now, he has an amazing idea, which I like the concept of it. And the concept is those, he calls it the automatic stabilizers. This concept, Sam, is an amazing idea. How do I make it work? I don't know. We might have technology to do so. I know Lisa's talking about technology. Lisa, technology can make it work to where everything is adjusted automatically, right, as inflation goes up. So insurance policies would be adjusted, right, as bank rates would be adjusted, loan rates would be adjusted. Conceptually, that's a good idea, because then when the crisis is over and things go back to normal, versus the way it is now is we create crisis laws and never change them. So yes, never change them. So I think, yeah, you'd have to have that kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. So, all righty. Joseph says, I enjoyed the conversation a lot, but I don't think it would benefit society to have UBI. I think it would benefit lazy people who just want to stay home and do nothing. I have a feeling we're going to find this out the hard way. Joe, you may be right. That is my worry too, as I said. Yes, I am worried. Yes. Any word in the happiness book? Yes, I'm trying to get the happiness book out by next month is my goal. I have a lot of personal issues I'm dealing with right now, which is slowing me down. But I hope that my book out, I hope by next month is my goal. We'll see. I've been saying that for a while. It's harder than I thought. I'm working on it. Thank you for caring, Zombie God 333. I do appreciate it. Yes. Crystal says, Scott had some good points, but the government would not give us a UBI without using it to screw things up like they do everything else. Crystal, this is another point, right? If we could find some way of me believing or feeling like it wouldn't just be used to punish, like it wouldn't just be slapped on top of a bad system, like we actually would get rid of a bunch of government employees and put them someplace else. If I believe that, I would be more open to it. Your worry is exactly my worry, that even if this is a great idea, that it's just going to be a disaster anyway, that our system is too broken, which is why I like his ideas of having a better electoral system, getting rid of duopoly, adding ranked choice voting. I think that will make things better, 100%. But also, maybe we have to have some direct democracy here or there, right, in certain cases to control some things. Because I feel like even if it's a good idea, it'll just be screwed up. That is my concern, right? That's one of my other big worries, is that we'll do a UBI. It'll just be a disaster like everything else. People take advantage of it. There'll still be all the other things. Bureaucracy will still be there. And we're just going to spend more money. Is that really what I want to do? And then Joe will be right. We'll all just stay home and be lazy and just not work. So yeah. Joel says the fair tax is being talked about a lot now. Yes. Right. And some of his taxation is good. He wants to eliminate income tax. I'm on board with that one. Let's do it. I'm in. All right. So yeah. Let's do that one. So yeah. And I'm okay taxing other things that people use, right? It's like you're using the thing. Go ahead. If I'm wealthy, I buy more stuff. I pay more tax. I'm not as wealthy. I buy less stuff. I pay less tax. Yeah. 100%. Totally okay with that. So yes. Andrea says, I work in Medicare and see there's so much bloat. Both the government and providers have to hire more administrative staff to meet all the regulations. Yes. But there's another thing he mentioned also, which I loved, which is he agrees that we want more people out of the black market and more people working. So he's actually against regulation. So there's some positive things here too. And this is what I'm saying. He's not like a typical guy you might think of, well, he's just, some lefty who wants to socialize everything. No, he wants to fix things and he believes this is the best way of doing it, right? That's where his head is. He's like, this is the best way of doing it. He believes it's the right thing. So I think you're right. He did agree that the regulations were a problem. If we get rid of those, we have more. I said it when I was running for governor, right? How do we deal with inflation? Inflation is too much money for the amount of goods and services. So either destroy the money or get more goods and services. I always err on allow more people to work, more businesses to thrive, more people to gig economies, create more goods and services. If we create more goods and services, that is our buffer against inflation. And I think he agrees with that. There are better ways to deal with inflation than taxation, right? It can work. Clearly, you can just tax the American people to not spending anymore. It can work. It just feels like such a hammer. I would much rather use the opposite way. I agree, Andrea. Paula says, my biggest fear with UBI is that I know people who would live on that UBI and never leave the house. I think we're seeing some of that right now. People with particularly veterans on disability who are now living in front of a computer. Yes. I think FIT would encourage, I think UBI, it would encourage more generational poverty even more. That's my other worry. But I have another worry, Paula, which is in the same world. If I'm not leaving the house, Paula, tough to find a mate so I can have a family. Just saying. Not impossible, but man, it's tough. It's a whole lot harder to go find real friends. It's harder to find. Can you? You can. Can you find a lover online? You can. It's just a whole lot harder. And then now the lover wants to go out. Well, you don't leave your house. You haven't put on pants 6 months. It's a whole lot harder. And I want people to be out, meeting people and finding friends and finding relationships and starting families and staying connected to their own family, right? Connected to their own family. I think all of those things. So, yeah, that's what I think. Absolutely. So, Lisa says, I think we should be very watchful and accountable with UBI, but all the studies show very positive results that can't be ignored. It must be funded correctly. I think the most important part, MMT isn't the way, in my opinion. See, I'm on your side with that, Lisa. If you remember, my plan wasn't about MMT because it's a state and states can't print their own money. Mine was about creating funds. And the countries that are doing this, like Norway is doing UBI, they have massive funds. If you don't know, Norway has, I think, the biggest, or it's in the top 3 at least for sure, biggest sovereign funds in the world. $1 trillion. There's only 5 million people in Norway. There's more people in New York City than there are in Norway. And they have $1 trillion fund. You got $1 trillion fund? UBI for everybody. There's 5 million of you and $1 trillion. You'll be fine. UBI for everybody. We don't have that. Right? New York State has debt upon debt upon debt. All the states are in debt, right? We don't have $1 trillion in our pocket. If New York State had $1 trillion surplus in the bank, UBI for everybody. All good. I have no problem. We don't have that. So that is a concern. I think we can find it via other ways than taxation and MMT. I think that's true. But his point is, it's not taxation. He's saying that the government doesn't actually run on tax. It runs on debt. And he feels that's better than running on taxes. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I mean, he's correct. That's what's happening. Yes. But I'm not sure that's the best way of doing things. That makes any sense. But yes, that is what's happening. Absolutely. So, all right. Shelley says, the gentleman gave many figures that he believes will work. I would have liked to have seen him do the actual math to prove his points. You can, if you actually care, Shelley. One thing I like about Scott, he's wide open. Like, you can go to his Twitter, go to his website. His blog is there. Absolutely. Win, lose, or draw, whatever you might think. The man is absolutely transparent. You can go there and check all his stuff. You care, you can go. He is 100% transparent. So you can do that. Absolutely. Yes. So Jerome says, he's suggesting fiat currency is backed by service of MMT, which theoretically grows the economy over utility. Huh. Okay. I see where you're going there. Okay. Let me grab a couple more if I could. Rick says, people should consider DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, as a way to achieve UBI. I would accept that also. That's how you could crowdfund it. Yes, agreed. Yes, absolutely. You could do it. 100%. You absolutely could do it. I'm okay with that concept. Absolutely okay with that concept. Yes. All right. Sam says, I would be that UBI house troll why would I get shit and abused in a job when the delta between wage and UBI is small? Yeah. Well, there is a point, right? In theory, Sam, I know you well enough that you actually care about things other than just work. I know that. So you would be able to go off and volunteer. There is an advantage, right? There is an advantage. And this is to, I think, Lisa's point. There is data that shows that people who get UBI, there is an increase in volunteerism. So you'd be able to volunteer more places that you might want to go to. So there is something you might do. You might find a job that you really want. It doesn't pay well, but you don't care. I got my UBI. I'll go there. But my other worry becomes something else, which is, isn't everybody going to want to pay you nothing and go, why are you complaining? You got your UBI, right? Is that going to be a thing? I don't know, right? I don't know. Maybe. Or does it actually now raise everyone's rates, right? So if you get a UBI, and we'll say this for sake of argument, of $1,500 a month, so you get 18 grand a year. Is that right? 18 grand? You get 18 grand a year. If your job is only going to pay you, to your point, Sam, $22,000 a year, with the taxation you're paying, you're not really making much. Why would you get a job? Makes sense. So now to work at any job, I have to pay you 30 grand a year, 40 grand a year. So that at a minimum, you go, you know what? It's worth it, right? Why would you, again, get abused in a job if there's not a huge difference? So it would raise the value of labor by default. Is that a good or a bad thing? I do think, as a general rule, raising the value of labor is good. But the question is it artificial? Right? Is Sam, are you actually more valuable to the market? Or did the government just make you more valuable through artificial means, like he was talking about intellectual property making a supply problem? Is that the case? I don't know if we know that, to be forward. I'm not sure if we understand that. But that's a problem, right? Do I want the government to artificially make labor more valuable? I do want labor to be more valuable. I want people to get higher wages. But I want it because they're providing more value, right? You're providing more value, you're doing more, so you deserve to get more money. You should get paid more, 100%. I hope we all make $3,000, an hour. It's amazing. I hope we all have that kind of value. But the question is the government making the value, or are you really that valuable? Those two things. So yes. Patty says, many right now need free events to go out and meet people. Yes. One old woman I know said, if it cost me money to walk to my mailbox, I'd never get the mail. Wow. Pat, it's powerful. It's powerful. It is, without question, an argument for UBI. It is. What you just said is an argument for UBI. Yes, absolutely. Joe says, I agree with this point about taxes not being needed. Would save so much in government spending if funded only via debt. Valid point. Agreed, right? Valid point. Yes. Jamie says, Norway does not start endless wars and build empires around the world. On the money, Jamie. On the money, yes. Correct. That's why they have the funds to. Yes, you're totally correct. They do neither of those things. Correct. Yes. So, point taken. And that's why they're sitting on a $1 trillion fund. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Gene says, MMT, magical money theory. He actually called it the magical money tree. I thought that was good. He actually called it that. Yes, the magical money tree. I do love that idea. Josh says, why wouldn't it be better to end income tax, property tax, sales tax, etc., instead of paying to get some back? Well, his idea was that you fix the inequality aspect via taxation. That's his idea, right? So I don't tax the people who are getting it, at a higher rate. I only tax the people who are wealthier. So they get a higher rate of taxation, right? Or it's a flat tax across the board. They all get whatever, 15%. So if you're only getting $20,000, you're hardly taxed at all compared to the guy or gal who's making $2 million. So his logic was you have control and incentives via taxation. That was his logic. Again, not sure I'm there, but I get it, right? It is simpler, right? His idea is simpler. So that's why, Josh, I'm answering the question. Andrew says, what if they put in the requirement to get medical treatments to get UBI? I don't trust the government not to explore that. So you can have your UBI, but only if you do X, Y, and Z. Oh, you don't do so-and-so? You don't get a UBI anymore. Maybe. I can see that. Absolutely. So guys, I'm asking you again, If you like what you saw and what we're talking about, click that like button if you haven't already. It does matter tremendously. It is so important to do so. I know I bug you because it matters. Please don't ignore that. Click that like button. If you're watching this on Twitter, please retweet. Every retweet matters. Just click retweet right now. It's good. It does matter. Please do it. If you want to do super chats, please feel free. Larry Sharp, YouTube does the super chats, but you can support me without super chats if you want to. You can just head over to theadvocates.org, take one of their special quizzes. They literally have a quiz on monetary policy. Take that quiz. See what you think about it. After hearing this, maybe you've changed your mind. Maybe you haven't. It's fine. This is very important that you do this because it makes them happy, which makes me happy. They are my sponsor. They help support the show, and it's free for you, right? They will ask for your email. If you like an organization that cares about self-governance, please give them your email, and they will send you an email probably once a month or so saying what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve. Please do that. If you don't want that, no worries. You can still share the test without giving your email. Do whichever you prefer. If you like them, please give your email. If you don't, you don't have to. But either way, please take one of those quizzes, one of those surveys, and then share it so that I can see it, so the advocates can be happy and I can be happy. It does help tremendously. I really do would like you to do that to help me out. Polo says, great show, even though UBI makes me crazy. How can I not end on that? Thank you guys very much for watching today. I will be back tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Libertarian Drinking Coffee Live. And then Friday, I'll be back on again talking about the opposite. Here I was talking about UBI. Friday, I'll be talking about, can the free market actually find solutions for urban problems? That will be special time, 3 p.m. on Friday. I will see you all very soon.